Yo guys, Visionist here bringing you the full Doctor Strange guide following the latest Season 2 update, breaking down all of his abilities, including his newly added team up and addressing both his strengths and weaknesses. This is episode 17 of my new Hero Series guides with all of the previous episodes on my channel, and on that note, let's get right into it. For anyone that played in Season 1 will already be aware of this, but anyone that's new to this game, Doctor Strange is one of the best vanguards in the game, who's responsible for damage mitigation using his shields, applying constant pressure using his primary attack, as well as dealing AoE damage, which is area of effect, utilizing his Maelstrom ability, as well as his ultimate ability used for dispersing grouped enemies, applying great point pressure for the groups on the objective, and as well as crowd control, and also utilizing his portal for its clutch factor when it's required. Now, in the latest Season 2 update, Strange has had some adjustments, making him more of a defensive focused tank, but he's less effective at dealing damage due to the nerf, but also taking away the Gamma team up ability that he had with Hulk, which previously negated his anti-heal and gave him a damage buff, whereas now he has a new team up ability with Scarlet Witch, which I'll explain shortly, and he acts as an anchor hero in this team up, which provides him with 600 health and a movement speed of 6 meters per second, which is pretty much standard for most of the characters in the game. Now, it's worth noting that Strange is what I call as a Vanguard a primary tank. Someone, as I mentioned, is responsible for damage mitigation, staying on the front line, applying point pressure and shielding the players behind you so they can constantly heal and build up their ultimates as well as deal damage, whereas other tanks in this game, maybe Venom or the likes of Captain America, are going to be more independent and isolated, therefore they're not going to be protecting your teammates and therefore should not be the single tank, whereas Strange and Magneto and Groot, they're really good at playing at the front and being on their own as long as you have healers behind you keeping you alive and good damage being dealt, because often in Season 1 and 1.5 we found that there was a 3 support, 3 strategist meta being used quite often, and therefore it didn't really have a 2 tank setup because you then would only have 1 damage, which I'm all for. I personally think 2 tanks is the way to go, but a lot of the time in the sort of higher ranks I found that there was only 1 tank being used, and to be honest, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It obviously depends on who you're against and also what map and mode and so on, various different factors, but for the most part Strange can be used in a 1 tank setup quite comfortably. Now, as for his abilities, he has his primary attack known as the Daggers of the Knack, which deal 18 damage per shot with an 8 ammo count. There's a fall off that begins at 10 meters and it decreases to 62.5% at 20 meters. So as you can see, he doesn't really deal that much damage anymore, especially at range. So you want to sort of be up close and personal, stay in the fight for as long as possible, as this is where you're going to maximize your damage output. Now, as well as this, combining with his R1 ability known as his Maelstrom of Madness, where he releases dark magic to deal damage to nearby enemies within an 8-meter radius. Each point of dark magic deals 1.2 damage. The fall off begins at 5 meters, so again alluding to his close quarter proximity and his damage output, decreasing to 70% at 8 meters. So it's not really going to affect anyone that's on the sort of full outskirts of his ability, and this ability also has an 8-second cooldown. But once you build this up to 100, this is a really effective ability and can really sort of blindside and sort of sneakily execute a player when they're not expecting that you've got 100 dark magic built up, because this damage output can be quite lethal at times. Now, as well as this, he also has his Cloak of Levitation. Using his L1 ability allows him to ascend into the air and then enter a brief state of sustained flight, where he dashes up into the air by 8 meters and then accesses free flight for 6 seconds. This ability is really clutch in certain situations when you're trying to play out your life, or you're trying to sort of go up into the air and block the likes of a Hela ultimate being used, or the likes of any other aerial that is constantly applying pressure, and therefore you can go up there and deal with them. And as well as combining with your Maelstrom ability, if you just hit the likes of an Iron Man in the air, once with your daggers and then once with your Maelstrom, you can pretty much one-hit them. So a little tip there for you guys, if you guys weren't aware how effective he can be in the air. This ability has a 15-second cooldown, so just bear that in mind and make sure you have it in your back pocket for when you need to escape when needed, especially if your team falls down behind you, usually from a diving comp, as that's when they're going to get behind you, and that'll be typically from the likes of Venom, Spider-Man, Black Panther, you name it. Now, as for his L2 ability, his main go-to, the Shield of Seraphim, by pressing L2 creates a protective barrier against damage, which pretty much blocks most of the damage in the game, other than melee attacks of course. This shield value has 800 maximum health with a 70 per second recovery speed with a 1 second delay after releasing the shield. So basically you can activate the shield and then wait a second and then reactivate the shield, and you can just keep opening it and dropping it over and over again to either block damage or just sort of build up your recovery on your actual shield itself. However, if it is destroyed, it does have a 3-second cooldown before it can start recovering, and then you can get back up to 800 shield value, and it is key for damage mitigation. As I've mentioned, this is his main go-to because you are meant to be responsible for blocking incoming damage and then sort of dropping it and dealing damage and then putting it back up again over and over again, and that's pretty much how you want to use this character, and that's sort of like the suggested combo as such that you want to go with. And then of course, as for his notorious portal ability known as the Pentagram of Pharrell, by pressing triangle allows him to open portals between 2 locations, allowing your entire team to push through. This portal is open for 20 seconds in duration, which is really important to understand because you don't want to be left behind and then leave a pacing issue for your team, especially when they're trying to blindside the enemy team. This ability has a 180 second, so 3-minute cooldown, so make sure you use this at the right time, because if you use it at the wrong time and you end up getting your entire team killed, you can pretty much leave your team a minute down, because if you guys already die, you then get up, use the portal, and then fail doing so, you've just lost another pretty much 30 seconds. So in the grand scheme of things, if you're trying to win games, don't use this ability just for the sake of having it. Make sure you time it right and use it properly. But it is a really clutch ability, one of the best clutch abilities in the game, something I think is really useful and something you need to be mastering by just using it, as I said, at the right time, either when your team needs it or right at the start of the round, which is quite expected coming into Season 2. A lot of teams now predict this, especially on the map like Clintar. They sort of predict that you're going to appear behind them. So often it's actually better to not use this ability off the break. As I mentioned, most people will get catching on by now. And then as for his passive abilities, known as the Price of Magic, this is key to understanding his survivability and also his damage output. The dark magic accumulates with every hit on an enemy, and if dark magic peaks too long, Doctor Strange will basically be cursed with anti-heal. So you need to make sure once this dark magic builds up, you are releasing it using the Maelstrom ability. Otherwise, you're going to start taking negative health, which is really important to understand how to stay alive by not doing so. Anti-heal activation delay at peak dark magic begins at 3 seconds. The anti-heal duration is 2 seconds. So just a little idea of how it actually works. And then, of course, as for the daggers of Danak, each hit that you generate with this primary attack generates 3.5 dark magic, but also any melee attack, also known as the whip, that you hit on any enemy will generate 10 dark magic as well. So effectively, you will want to be utilizing this whip at close quarters in order to build up your dark magic, to then release your Maelstrom, and then use your Danak, your daggers, in order to deal range damage. That way you can maximize his damage output at its best, and that way you can also build up your dark magic as quick as possible each time. But just remember to release the dark magic so you don't take anti-healing. Now, as for the newly added team ability known as Enchanted Enhancement, where Doctor Strange shares his Arcane Mastery with Scarlet Witch, replacing her previous Chthonian Burst ability with Mystic Burst, which basically allows her to deal more damage, this relentless salvo magical missile strike. And also for Strange, as the anchor being, he pretty much gains 100 max health, giving him a better base health in this new update ahead of the sort of new season with the new meta, and also being more defensively focused, as I mentioned. And finally, as for the ultimate ability, the Eye of Agamotto, where Strange separates the enemy souls from their bodies, and any damage dealt to these souls is transferred to the physical bodies in a 10-meter radius. You can deal 60 damage from the initial blast of this ultimate with a 3-second stun duration. The energy cost of this ultimate is 3,400, which is pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things, especially considering his previous damage output in the last season. But overall, this ultimate is one of the best clutch factor ultimates in the game, in my opinion. Something that really sets up other uses of ultimates, such as maybe Moon Knight or Psylocke, really, really well. And I find this ultimate to be extremely impactful, especially for those clutch situations at the end of a game. And you kind of, if you're using this ultimate, you need to count what other teams' ultimates have been used or have they maybe potentially got, because if you can try and time this at the right time when no one's got a protective ultimate to sort of counter you, you're going to get a consistent 6-man. You're going to constantly kill the entire team, as no one can stop this. And as I mentioned, you are stunned for 3 seconds when you get hit with this ultimate ability, so there's nothing you can do whatsoever. Strange was actually the first Lord hero I got in this game, someone I really understood quite easily from the get-go, and someone I enjoyed throughout, which is why I got him Lord first. Someone that is just key for this game, and in my opinion, one of the most vital characters leading up to Season 2. But in summary, he is a damage blocker, one of the best damage blockers, responsible for mitigation of incoming damage, an AoE damage expert, point pressure and support protector, and all-round a really consistent Vanguard in this game. Now, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have any tips and tricks that you've learned along the way that I've not mentioned, or in Season 2 so far, let me know down below in the comments. I'm Vision SGN, and I'll see you in the next one.